This video highlights the importance of presentation in maths, particularly with the layout of calculations. So looking at pure maths, so in our school we use the review and do system where we just have a few things to remind ourselves of. So in this calculation, 3,763 add 129. I've laid it out using the formal written method, which is vertical columns. Now, whenever we write, here's the important information. Whenever we write a number, it should be 1 digit per box. Now, whether that's the date up here or calculations, we're sticking to 1 number per box, as you can see here. Starting with the ones column, I would add this up first. 3 plus 9 is 12. Then I do 6 tens plus 2 tens, add 1 10 is 9 tens. 700s add 100 is 800s, and 3000s added to nothing is still 3000s, and there is my answer. Now, we can see that by laying out 1 digit per box, columns, not leaving any gaps between them, so they all line up, it's much easier to complete the calculation and read the answer. Any carried digits, so my 12 there, we can still see 12. 9 plus 3 is 12. The extra 10, because 10 and 2 is 12, that extra 10 is added into the tens column. Sometimes we'll see it written here, and sometimes we'll see it written here. It's easier in this instance to write it here, just because it's out of the way, but we mustn't forget to add it in. 6 plus 2, add the 1. Other things to remember, we might want to label things, so you might get asked sometimes to label your calculation, label what you've done. The labels need to be written on the lines. Unfortunate in maths, because if we rotate the book portrait to landscape, we've still got lines, but we always write on the lines, nice and neatly. We might need to do arrows, they should be neat as well. But as you can see, writing on the lines. Now, the other really important thing to remember when setting out calculations is to give yourself plenty of space. You need to leave space between each calculation, so I've got space there. I've numbered my calculations. They'll correspond with the numbers that are on whatever task you've been given. And I've labelled the place value for each column, just to remind myself, just to help me reinforce place value. That's worth 2, that's 3 tens, that is 6 hundreds, and it's really important to remember that now that we're not using the expanded method. And so we can see I've got my one calculation, it's nice and contained, it's small, it's not taking up any extra space, but equally I've not squashed the next calculation right up next to it, giving myself plenty of space so that I don't make mistakes. So we're saying we don't squeeze calculations in. If we need to, I'll go on to the next page, but equally, I'm not wasting space. I'm not going to leave myself a huge gap and just have 2 or 3 calculations on a page. We can see this here. This is a hook task now, so rather than a review and do, I've gone with a hook task. Here is the hook task that you'll have seen before, because we've done this one. Basically, odd one out, prove which calculation doesn't appear in the grid. Well, for me, the easiest way to prove that was to work out these calculations and see which answer doesn't appear. Now, as you can see, there are quite a few calculations here. There are 9, I know this because it's 3 by 3, there are 9 answers, but only 8 calculations. Now, I've spaced all my calculations out. I've obviously not numbered them because they're not numbered here, but as I've done them, I did my first one here, and then I crossed it off, and I crossed the answer off as well. And then I worked through systematically, but notice there's a space between each calculation, they're self-contained. The carried over digits line up with the columns that they're supposed to, so 5 and 8 makes 13, so there's my 3, there's the extra 10. 4 and 1 make 5 tens, so 5 tens plus 5 tens makes 10 tens. 10 tens is worth 100, there is no tens digit in 100, it's a 0, and the extra 1 here is 1 in the hundreds because it's worth that 100. 200s plus 200s plus 100 makes 500, and 1000 add nothing is 1000. I've kept my calculations nice and tidy, they're spaced out, they're neat, and I've labelled the place value columns at the top. I've not forgotten to put my calculation symbol in. It doesn't seem so important when they're all additions, but at some point we may begin to introduce additions and subtractions to a problem like this, and we need to see what the actual calculation is. It's important for you so that you can see, oh, I'm doing 5 add 8, or 8 take away 5, or whatever the calculation would be. And then once I've done my calculations, worked them all out, crossed them all off, done my systematic approach, I was left with 1. And then the important thing to do, write my reasoning sort of sentence at the end there. I've labelled it reasoning, I've kept that neat, I've written on the lines, I've not taken up excess space. The odd one out must be 2,914. You'll notice the number is still 1 digit per box because all of the other numbers are the answers for the addition calculations. And that's how it should look. This is how a hook task should be laid out in your book. We've got the task there, title if it's not already on the sheet for you. Okay, if you've got a big sheet stuck in, these calculations would just be underneath. Again, if I run out of space, I'll go on to the next page. I won't try and squash any more in. Equally, if there's no space to write my reasoning question at the end, go on to the next page. Not a problem. Date, 1 digit per box, underlined. Hook, which is the title for this piece, underlined. And that's how it should look. Keep your calculations neat. It's worth doing because it makes it so much easier to get the right answer, to not make mistakes, and if you do make mistakes, to find out where they are and correct them.